Well, the unity is always there. Uh, it, Whenever one enters into duality, it is always an illusion. And it's a stage of consciousness. We've got consciousness levels themselves down to sacred geometry. And you can actually see it. It has to do with the squaring of the circle. If you take the square, perimeter of a square, and then make that equal to the circumference of a circle, that gives you 1.6180339, and the golden mean appears. And there is a pattern of geometry that you can show that as the circles and squares expand out of what's called a geometrical progression. It starts with a little circle and square, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. As these things progress out, there's very definite points where they become very close to the golden mean, and as they expand out further, they keep getting closer and closer, just like the Fibonacci sequence does. And so there's a point where life becomes focused at one point, where humankind becomes focused anyway. And that level is a unity consciousness because it's very, very close to the golden mean. And those would be people like the Kogi in Colombia, or the Aboriginals in Australia, or the Waitaha in New Zealand. Some of the very, very old tribes that go back much farther than our archaeologists ever dreamed, and at least according to them, and I believe them. And but they have a different DNA sequence than we do. They're different. You can tell. You could scientifically prove if they're in there or not. And then there's us. And that's the next level out from there. And if you measure our circle and square, the one that produces our level of consciousness, it's not even close to the golden mean. We are a disharmonic level of consciousness. But in the wisdom of the Creator, in order to get from the first level to the next level, which is also harmonic, we have to pass through this place we're in. And I see it kind of like a stone in the middle of a river, and you're trying to get from one bank to the other. The two banks are harmonic, and that little stone's not very harmonic. It's not a very safe place to be. And so you just land on it, and you get to the other side as soon as you can. You don't stay there. Well, we've been there for 13,000 years, which is a very quick jump. And but if we stay where we are, we will kill everything, because we're not in harmony with the rest of the universe, or even this planet. And so our very nature of who we are is dangerous. But we have to pass through here. We have to be who we are. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's just necessary. And then we get to the other side, and then we're into even a higher level of unity than we were in the indigenous people. And that is the goal of everything that is going on Earth right now. In ancient times, a lot of the indigenous tribes used different forms of psychedelics, and they actually used, they never used any of the kind of things that modern man is using. Those kind of drugs are bad for consciousness, because they make you go back down the other way. But a lot of the psychedelics that they use, the San Pedro cactus and the coca leaves and the mushrooms and things like this, these were the natural things that they used. That was another way for them to begin to see that there was more in consciousness beyond it. Once they experienced it, they would search the rest of their life trying to find what that was about. In the world, there are many beautiful ways of meditation that will lead you into that. There's not just one pathway. I mean, I have been shown a pathway which I teach, but that's not the only pathway. There are a lot of other ones that will work just as well. And so Tibetan Buddhism has their ideas, and Hinduism has lots of ideas. Sufism has other ideas. Taoism is a very simple, easy way to live through to find the source of life. There are many, and that are old and have been tried, and other people have taken those pathways and that work. If that is what someone is thinking about, they need to try these different ways. I mean, I went and I tried lots of them. I tried everything you can think of almost. I had over, I don't know how many teachers I had. At one point I counted them. There was over 70. Where, and the angels a lot of times would actually give me the name, address, and phone number of a teacher who I'd never heard of in my life. And they'd say, call this person up. And I'd call them. It would be that person always kind of. And then I was to go study with them. I'd say, can I study with you? Yep. I'd go there and I would learn as much as I could from them. And and people have very different views. The truth is there's only one reality. This is what I learned from the whole thing. There is whatever there is, but there's lots of ways of interpreting that one reality, and how you perceive it. And, duality that you were speaking about before, this level of consciousness we're in, this is just one way. The universe has learned over 100,000, slightly more, 100,000 major ways that when you look through that lens, the universe appears completely different. Some of them, a lot of them don't have any stars and planets in it or anything else, yet it's the same place. It appears differently. And then underneath each one of those 100,000 different ways are trillions of possibilities. And so you can look at this one, unity or polarity consciousness, is one way of looking at life. And then you look at all the animals and bacteria and bugs and all those other life forms that are generated from the same way of perceiving reality. That's all consciousness is how we interpret the one reality. And as we go up and around the body, in these electromagnetic geometrical forms that surround the body, as you do, your attention shifts to different shapes and forms. And so the Merkaba field that is taught in the book, the first two books I taught, that is the second possibility. The first one is really simple, and shamans and medicine men around the world have been using it for thousands of years. But it isn't strong enough for what we need for what we're doing. The one that I'm teaching in there now is perfect for what we're doing, even though there are people trying to say we need more complex things, because that's what the earth has around her right now. And so we're in tune with the earth, and as she moves into higher levels, we move with her. When we get into the next levels, then we can shift to different Merkaba fields. Global warming is connected to consciousness, and that would take a long time to explain, but everything that happens on the earth, the angle, the axis of the earth, and our orbit around the earth, all these things affect how we interpret the one reality that we were talking about. Global warming is nothing new. Of course it's happened before. We've traced it back 240 million years, and there's been a cycle going on for a very long time. There's a man named Dr. John Hamaker. His work was significant, and that was in, I believe it was the late 60s or so when he presented that information to the world. Hardly anybody ever brings them up. But he went around to ancient lake beds all over the world and took core samples that were 6 inches in diameter and 11 feet deep, and he could see back into about 200 and something million years in these core samples. And they can just read this, and what they discovered is that the ice ages have been very periodic. Basically, the ice ages are about 90,000 years long, and the warm periods are about 10,000. They actually range from about 8 to 12, but they're about 10,000 years long. And so you see, what they found in the lake beds was, you see 90,000 years, approximately, of no pollen, because it's just ice and no growth of plants or anything else like that. And then followed by a little period of 8 to 10, 12,000 years, about 10,000 years long, of where there's pollen, followed by another 90,000 years of no